all across America and around the world. This is Veterans Radio. This is Veterans Radio.
Welcome to Veterans Radio. I am Jim Fausone. I'm the officer of the deck today. We've got some great programs for you. I think you'll find very interesting. We always want to remind you can find more about Veterans Radio at its Facebook site or by going to veteransradio.net, where we're on the web 24/7. You can find a lot of our podcasts there as well. We post new ones every Tuesday, so you can get a new story, a new interview, something you didn't know before by going to veteransradio.net. And before we get started, we want to thank our sponsors. First up, we want to thank National Veteran Business Development Council, nvbdc.org. It was established to certify both service-disabled and veteran-owned businesses. You'll find out how they can help your business by going to nvbdc.org. We want to thank Legal Help for Veterans. Legal Help for Veterans fights for veterans' disability rights all across the nation. You can reach them at 800-693-4800 or on the web at legalhelpforveterans.com. We want to welcome to Veterans Radio today Colonel Matthew Amidon, United States Marine Corps Reserve, but we've got him on because he's the Director of Veterans and Military Families down at the George W. Bush Institute, and because of a recent opinion we're going to talk about that he wrote that caught my eye. Colonel, welcome to Veterans Radio.
Jim, thanks so much for having me.
Now, you flew Harrier, you're a Harrier pilot. You did some time over with Operation Enduring Freedom, Operation Iraqi Freedom. You're on the reserve capacity. You're an assistant wing commander. So you've been in for how many years at this point?
It'll be 30 years this coming January. So as you well know, and I know your wife Carol Ann will know as well, that the days are long, but the years are short. It's gone by in a flash.
It does.
I could do it all over again.
Yeah, it really does. But many veterans continue to do kind of what you're doing, and that is help the larger fraternity of those who might be thinking about getting into the military or are in the military and getting out, becoming veterans. And you wrote a piece about the problem with recruiting into the all-volunteer military forces that we have going on today. And that's really what caught my eye, Matt, that I said, man, we got to talk about this. I don't think enough people realize what the impact of this would be. And honestly, you called out veterans to step up and help their country. And I said, well, okay, I think he's talking directly to me. Let's see if he'll get on the horn here and talk to a wide audience of why this is, what the problem is, and how do we fix it. Colonel, why don't you set up what the problem is?
Well, I appreciate this, and I also a shout out to the 18.8 million vets in this country who are stepping up, and so this was just a really deliberate ask to continue to contribute to advancing our democracy. But to your point, in doing so, the all-volunteer force since 1973 is in a bit of what I would call a crisis mode right now. This will be probably the worst year for military recruiting since 1973, and we often look to the Army as sort of the example. They have obviously this enormous annual recruiting challenge, and they're unlikely to meet their recruiting goals. The other services are challenged as well. The Navy and Marine Corps appear on track, but I think all services acknowledge the true challenges of the current recruiting environment. We can't just sit here and indict the problem, though. I think we have to acknowledge the realities of our today, though, Jim, and that is we are still, across the country exiting out of 2 years of the pandemic. We And that, I think, impacted those amazing recruiters and their abilities to have access to the young talent on our school campuses. So I just share that with you and look forward to diving into the conversation.
Well, yeah, it really does set it up, and the pandemic has changed everything for everybody. But you really have to stop and think about if the Army and the Air Force looks like it may be as much as 10% off its recruiting goals. If they're off on their manning at that level, it has an impact today on what we could respond to, but it also has a long-term impact as those young men and women go through the years. Some will stick around, some will make it a career, some won't. But you get a narrower and narrower pool if you're off by 10 or 20 or 30% in your recruiting goals. So it's both a short-term problem and a long-term problem. The pandemic didn't make it any better, but there are also other sort of systematic problems in recruiting people today. Maybe talk about a few of those.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I appreciate your commentary on this is not just a today problem. This does beget a tomorrow problem in that your young recruits of today, you need to be your NCOs and your staff NCOs of tomorrow. And I will forever say that our NCOs and staff NCOs are the undeniable backbone of our all-volunteer force. But in doing so, to dive into a little bit more of what may be the insidious or systemic issues facing recruitment challenges, number one is sort of the enduring tension of economic demand signals. I mean, whatever your beliefs are, by and large, it does appear to be a fairly strong job market. So that always competes in tension to the propensity to raise one's hand in support of the Constitution. But I think, and you all in the amazing work you've been doing for so many years know that DoD periodically, through what I believe is called their JAMR survey, sort of pulses young kids around the country and assesses their propensity to serve. And that has been declining what I would consider significantly over the last number of years, in which on one of the more recent surveys, right at 9% of those young adult surveys indicated their propensity to serve. The rest are not really interested at all. And that runs directly in parallel to those in the age-eligible population. If you were interested in or willing to serve, less than a quarter even meets standard, and that has to do, of course, with criminality, educational attainment, educational levels, and physicality, and the challenge of obesity facing some of our young kids today.
And again, as you think about these things, you can't. We have a military that where 1% of the population serves nowadays and protects the other 99. There's got to be folks who are willing to serve to protect the democracy, protect the republic.
Yep. And
it starts with these, the young kids. If they're not there, sooner or later, this all falls apart. And we're not a country like China who can just order up, hey, 1 million of you are going in. So, if you're going to stay a volunteer force, how do we get over this problem? Do you see it, Matt, as just it's a 1 year off, or are we in a trend here?
I think we need to address it, Jim. I think this potentially is a very disturbing trend. But let me stop for a moment, and I think you all would agree. If there was truly an existential moment to this country tomorrow, I have no doubt that Americans would jump at the chance to serve their country and one another if it truly was existential. The issue and the problem is we still need and always need a high quality all volunteer force to represent our interests, defend the nation, fight and win the nation's wars, and enhance our national security. And in doing so, I think to your point, there have to be candid and multidimensional conversations tabled, and that is it is a recruiting issue. Do the recruiting standards of today truly meet the recruiting needs of tomorrow? And I point to, the incredible importance of the cyber domain. Do we need our recruits who will be our cyber warriors to have the same degree of physicality as an infantry Marine or people of that MOS specificity. So that's one issue we need to face. We also need to acknowledge the increasing rates of mental health diagnoses amongst our young Americans, and whether those are, waiverable conditions, or how we manage those as well. And I think a lot of the research will show those are very manageable conditions and allow you greater predictive capacity to address need signals as they arise, downstream of one's career. But you point to another thing. The young kids are out there, the all-volunteer force, the less than 1% who serve, increasingly are becoming kind of a family business, more regionally specific. And kind of the point of my thesis was, this is not just an intake opportunity. This is a veteran opportunity. And when I say step up, I mean, I point to the amazing organizations out there, all the way from the more traditional ones like the VFW, the Legion, the amazing patriots, who are members of those organizations, but also to some of the younger ones like Team Rubicon, Team Red, White, and Blue, the Mission Continues, the Travis Manion Foundation, Student Veterans of America, and others. These veteran organizations are any and everywhere around our country. And so if you can really shine a spotlight on veterans as continued leaders in our country and use them as exemplars to our younger generation, I believe that's a linkage we should really explore in enhancing and increasing the propensity to serve. And maybe we start with, interest in serving in one's community, in the nonprofit sector. And then perhaps as one matures, you contemplate service to our nation. Really what I'm getting at is just service to our democracy, service to one another, and service to our communities.
And I think it's important to try to put a light on the great opportunities military service provides, and how it's really evolved, right? At 9/11, we had a surge of people joining up. We had 20 years of war. We're in a different period now, but we're also in a different period. You brought up the cyber area. I mean, we do things today that take skill levels, both, operators and technicians and computer specialists, whether it be cyber drones or unmanned underwater vehicles, computer analysts on satellite data. I mean, there's an amazing amount of work that's done by the military service that I don't know we get enough light shined on, so that every kid doesn't say, well, I don't really want to carry a gun, but that stuff's pretty cool. How do we get that message out, I think, is one of the questions I have. I
agree. The domains of future warfare aren't necessarily the traditional ones. Absolutely agree with you. And I also look at the veterans. It's not just those organizations I mentioned, but there's 18.8 million vets in this U.S. in the U.S., as you well know. I think that when you look at the average survey, 80% of those are very proud of their time in service and would recommend it to a close family member. Well, how about increase that aperture and recommend it to those in your community? And in doing so, to your point, service in the all-volunteer force, I think for many is a pathway to, future opportunity. It maybe increases your trajectory, both professionally and personally. It instills within you that sense of community, belonging, purpose, used to serving and deciding in discontinuous environments. And there's a wonderful array of work being done at Penn State with the Veterans Metrics Initiative, and they can show that this is largely true. Now, there are a few subpopulations that we really need to be aware of, and those are the ones that we always need to address with resources and services. But I think you can largely point to the fact that the vast majority of veterans in this country are exactly the continued leaders that we truly need.
And I get a chance to talk to, and actually I seek out a lot of veteran business owners. And every time I talk to them here on Veterans Radio, Colonel Matthew Amidon, we're talking to presently, who's the Director of Veterans and Military Families for the George W. Bush Institute. Matt, every time I talk to a veteran business owner, they tell me how fundamental, how foundational their time in service was for ultimately being a successful entrepreneur or businessman. And I just don't know that we shine a light on that, We realize, hey, he's a great, or she's a great businessman, or a great doctor, a medic, a law enforcement official. But maybe we also ought to be calling out that these folks got their start in military service, and you can too.
Yep. No, exactly right. And I think some previous comments you made, we as a nation can and should always debate this recent exit from Afghanistan. But to your point, it has sort of revealed that pivotal shift in national intent. Are we not back to, but are we, pivoting towards what we would consider some of the more traditional peer-to-peer, state-on-state conflict or competition? But in doing so, my concern is that will philanthropic wins, will policy, programmatic, and national interests sort of fade elsewhere? And that may be a natural thing, but we can't stop the reality that the business of the Department of Defense appears to be fairly enduring, and that every year, choose your number, but between 150, 200,000 plus service members become veterans. And to your point, we need to shine a spotlight on those who've walked the path before them to show that service absolutely is a pathway to opportunity. And within that, we need to stay focused with all stakeholders at the table. It's not just a government opportunity. This is private sector, philanthropic, community, nonprofit, to ensure that transition pathways are effective and efficient. And it does require all of us.
It really does. And we do have a model that I kind of think we ought to think about, and that is, we have employer support groups, right? Where we recognize employers who help out the military, maybe National Guard, active duty, and we hold up those companies that do such a good job of being good employers in that regards. But I don't know that we're helping out the high school student or the community college student or the beginning college student who's thinking about this. But are you aware of any groups that are sort of saying, hey, I'm focusing in on helping them understand the opportunities?
I know that there are some unique organizations out there. And let me just first, if I could comment, you all are up in Michigan, and you have your M-SPAN and your PAVE program. I think M-SPAN is run by Dr. Michelle Keys. So anyway, a shout out to the proud residents of Michigan, especially with your National Guard as well, about how you're trying to get after that high quality transitions, pathways within and through education to employment. But there's been, I'm going to point to a couple that maybe appear or feel like random things, but there's a recent effort called the Positivity Project. There's also our incredible Medal of Honor community, and through the Congressional Medal of Honor Society, or I think that's what they're called.
Yes, it is, yeah.
Serving as examples in our nation's high schools and middle schools about the importance of civics, civic leadership, national service, and storytelling. And so to answer your question not so precisely, I think those are things that we really need to shine a spotlight on, especially to our young kids, just to show that your nation needs you. Many of you want to serve something greater than yourself, and here's how you do it.
I couldn't agree more that anytime you have an opportunity to meet and talk to or listen to a Medal of Honor recipient, you're going to go away proud. They are the most humble men you can bump into. It's never about them. Their heroics are really part of that much bigger story. So I agree we should have those guys everywhere we can, and we get them on Veterans Radio as often as we can, Matt. But is DOD doing enough to encourage that younger population to look at military service. It sort of feels like the commercials have gone away, the support or the advertising that you saw maybe at football games and elsewhere have gone away. Maybe I'm not looking in the right spot. Maybe they're over in NASCAR. Maybe they're on gaming stations. But give me some sense of, is this something DOD's kind of pulled back on and may have to expand on at this point?
I think it's, again, appropriate to acknowledge again the effects of COVID. I know you guys have seen that. I do agree with you in terms of the recruiting messaging and the commercials. I'm not seeing as much of those as possible, but it will be interesting to see, again, in that this is a today problem, but in the next year or so, what happens to recruiting numbers now that we have our recruiters out walking the streets with the access back to the high schools that have been historically quite successful places for them to recruit the next generation of leaders. You and I, we all know that this is deeply concerning to DOD, and I have no doubts that they will leverage everything at their disposal to be successful. But in order to do that, the point, again, is it's not just a DOD opportunity. It also is leveraging those amazing programs like the Army's Soldier for Life, the Marine Corps' Marine for Life. How do you leverage those intersections between those who have served and those who potentially will serve? So it's not just a DOD intake problem, it's also an opportunity for those who have served.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've been so focused on things like veteran employment, veteran mental health, just veteran health in general, access and expanding presumptive conditions and what have you.
Yep.
If you ask a veteran to help out in the area of recruiting, they're going to show up. If the recruiters say, hey, can you guys come to a fair where I'm talking about this because you're a successful truck driver and you're a successful police officer and you're a computer analyst, come talk to folks about how you got your start. We'll show up. I just think we need to be asking the veterans, which was really your call out, which caught me, which was, hey, it's time for our veterans to help out on this issue, and there's a lot of ways to do it. I think they just have to be asked. Don't you think they'll respond if they get asked?
I absolutely do, and I'm just going to quote President Bush for a second in a speech he gave a number of years ago. But we all have a responsibility to support veterans and military families. But he, in that speech, also called upon them to continue their service in advancing the security, the economy, and the sustained health of our democracy as veterans and civilians. So I think that's just a very important thing. And to your point, I think if we can have a very deliberate ask, like within the daily course of your job, whether as a first responder, business leader, just assess your environment. Where are the intersections with tomorrow's generations? What can you talk about? How can you afford those connections to recruiters who can more fundamentally offer that opportunity of national service? No,
it's a perfect quote for the topic. And I wanted to bring up one sort of another old school, but we've talked to some guys who are involved in the junior ROTC program. And I wasn't exposed to it, but I am amazed at how powerful the junior ROTC program is for helping high school students in leadership and discipline, and not necessarily a pathway to the military, but certainly an opportunity to show them what may be available. And I think there's another area where, maybe more could be done, and more schools could get involved with that kind of program, and it may lead to an increase in recruiting.
So I'll just say that I completely agree with you, and I think even if it doesn't beget, raising one's right hand to take an oath to the Constitution, it increases awareness in doing so. And we should also, table the hard and candid conversations. Where is JROTC? Where isn't it? How can we, enhance or increase its presence around the country? We can ask the same question of ROTC programs around the country. Where are they? Where aren't they? if you listen to the former, I believe, undersecretary within the Navy Department, Juan Garcia, it took him a number of years to get, I believe, some ROTC programs back on the campuses in the Ivy League structure. My point in saying that is, when we talk about the need for a diverse all-volunteer force, that means we need to distribute the opportunity in, the diverse communities around our country, not just in a select few.
That's right. You mentioned it was turning into a family business where generations say, "Oh, hey, he had a good opportunity, a good life. I'm going to go follow that pathway," or it is a increased only. You only recruit out of around active duty bases. Therefore, it's primarily a Southern thing. We really have to spread this wider for creating opportunities for folks who may not otherwise realize what's really available to them.
And I think that's where we have to double down. I love the way, I think his name is Dr. Mike Strobel, and he's a SES with the Marine Corps, who says, here's why diversity matters. And to my point is where we should have really diverse and distributed recruiting efforts is the Marine Corps is in the critical problem-solving business. And, solving problems requires diverse skill sets, diverse thinking, and those are highly correlated to every other diversity category. It's not that you're being diverse for diversity's sake. It's you're being diverse because it enhances your warfighting capacity. So I totally agree with you. I think the normal narrative of Talking Point is we recruit to America's Smile, which is those southern belt of states, as you mentioned, but where and when are the other opportunities? And in that, if we can't get if we can't get recruiters to those communities, well, last time I checked, veterans are in about every town in the U.S.
Absolutely. Again, ask and they'll show up. We're talking to Colonel Matthew Amidon, United States Marine Corps Reserves. He's the Director of Veterans and Military Families for the George W. Bush Institute. I kind of skipped over at the beginning asking you to explain what the George W. Bush Institute is, so I'll let you do that on the way out of our interview here.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, President and Mrs. Bush have led, and the team here in Dallas have built something that I think will have lasting significance. I share with your listeners that what drives us here at the Bush Institute in Dallas, and it's open to all, but we are rooted in our conservative heritage, but we embrace all who wish really to create lasting, meaningful change for our nation. And the reason why that's important, and I think directly with what you and I are talking about today, there's 4 pillars that drive everything we do. And those are freedom, opportunity, accountability, and compassion. So I'm just very proud of the program and the team here. We have numerous programs, but we really are focused on ensuring opportunity for all, strengthening democracy, and advancing free societies. And the Veterans and Military Program is focused on those. And I think sustaining an all-volunteer force requires sustaining a high-quality veteran community. And I think you and I would agree that it's not really the all-volunteer force, it's the all-volunteer family.
Oh, absolutely.
So
absolutely.
The immense talent in that community to do those things, opportunity for all, strengthen our democracy, and advance free society. So very proud to have been here for almost 10 years.
Well, that's great. It's great work you do. I appreciate your op-ed piece that brought this to my attention, Colonel. And I do think it's an important issue that every veteran has a stake in, as well as everybody in the country, because without a strong military force, our democracy is or would be in trouble. So thanks for spending a little time with Veterans Radio today and shining a spotlight on this issue for us.
No, thanks to you and the team, and thank you for the long-standing and incredible work you're doing. And I would leave you with completely agreeing with what you just said. Our democracy's tomorrow is not promised to us, and it requires all of us. So I'm truly honored to be here with y'all.
And I want to thank everybody for listening to Veterans Radio today. I am Jim Fausone. It's been a pleasure to be your host. I'm a veterans disability lawyer at Legal Help for Veterans, and you can reach us at 800-693-4800 or legalhelpforveterans.com on the web. You can follow Veterans Radio on Facebook and listen to its podcasts and internet radio shows by going to veteransradio.net. And until next time, you are dismissed.
If you have a VA claim denied by the Board of Veterans' Appeals, contact Legal Help for Veterans at 1-800-693-4800. They're experts in handling cases before the U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims. Their number again, 1-800-693-4800.
We again want to thank our national sponsors, the National Veterans Business Development Council, nvbdc.org, VA Ann Arbor Health Care System, the Vietnam Veterans of America Charles S. Kettles Chapter, Ann Arbor, Michigan, VFW Graf O'Hara Post 423 in Ann Arbor, and the American Legion Press Corn Post 46, also in Ann Arbor. We appreciate all your support. You can go to veteransradio.net, click on the sponsor level, and continue to support keeping Veterans Radio on the air. And until next time, you are dismissed.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.